Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani is likely to propose a new presidential election within 6 months. Reuters quoted two Afghan officials as saying that Ghani will unveil his proposal at an international gathering in Istanbul next month. They said the proposal signals Ghani's refusal to a US plan calling for an inclusive interim setup to pave the way for peace in Afghanistan. The nation is celebrating Pakistan Day today with the renewed commitment to work hard for the progress and the stability of the country. The day dawned with a 31-gun salute in the federal capital and a 21-gun salute in provincial capitals. On this day in 1940, Muslims of the subcontinent passed the historic Lahore resolution, which led to the creation of Pakistan. In their messages, President Dr. Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan expressed solidarity with the oppressed people of Indian-occupied Kashmir. Russia and China have called for a UN Security Council summit after the West imposed curbs on them over the alleged human rights violations. The two allies made the call in a joint statement following talks between their foreign ministers in China. They urged countries not to interfere in their affairs with Moscow, saying they believe the US is acting in a destructive way. In Myanmar, a 7-year-old girl has died of bullet wounds in Mandalay. Security forces continue their crackdown on anti-coup protesters. At least one person was killed in shooting elsewhere in the city. More than 250 people have been killed since the military seized power on the 1st of February. The Ethiopian Prime Minister has admitted to war crimes in Tigray, where fighting persists as government troops hunt down fugitive rebels. Speaking in Addis Ababa, Abiy Ahmed said soldiers who committed atrocities will be held responsible. The conflict in Tigray began in November last year when Abiy sent troops into the region following an attack on military facilities. In Brazil, over 1,300 more people have died from coronavirus overnight, raising the death toll over 295,000. In Pakistan, 72 people lost their lives to the virus, while nearly 3,300 tested positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.7 million lives and infected 123 million people. And in cricket, New Zealand beat Bangladesh by 5 wickets in the second one international to win the 3-match series 2-0 at Christchurch. They completed the target of 272 runs in the second last over. Tom Latham was declared player of the match for scoring an unbeaten century. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The nation is celebrating Pakistan Day today with a renewed commitment to work hard for the progress and the stability of the country. On this day in 1940, Muslims of the subcontinent passed the historic Lahore resolution, which led to the creation of Pakistan. More in this report.
The day dawned with a 31-gun salute in the federal capital and a 21-gun salute in provincial capitals. A change of guard ceremony was held at the mausoleum of the inceptor of the ideology of Pakistan, Allama Iqbal, in Lahore. In their messages, President Dr. Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan urged the nation to remember the Kashmiris who are being subjected to the worst form of repression and state-sponsored terrorism. Prime Minister Imran Khan also expressed solidarity with the innocent people of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan's embassies around the world are also celebrating Pakistan's National Day. The Nigerian embassy organized an event in which children played the national anthem of Pakistan. In the United States, New York's Times Square was festooned with the colors of the Pakistan flag. Ankara's landmark buildings were also decorated with Pakistan's flag. However, due to downpours in the capital city of Islamabad, the Pakistan Day parade has been postponed until Thursday.
US President Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi have felicitated the Pakistani nation on Pakistan Day. In a letter to his Pakistani counterpart Arif Alvi, Biden said that ties with Pakistan are based on the shared goal of peace and prosperity. He said Washington will continue to work with Pakistan on the Afghan peace, climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. In his message, Modi conveyed his best wishes to Prime Minister Imran Khan and the people of Pakistan. He said India wants cordial relations with Pakistan. On the 23rd of March 1940, Muslims of India passed the Lahore Declaration, where the Minar-e-Pakistan now stands in all its glory. The resolution called for the establishment of a separate homeland for the Muslims of British India. The declaration was based on Pakistan's founder, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's belief that Hindus and Muslims can't stay together due to differences in religion, culture and traditions. 81 years after that historic day, Jinnah's belief stands vindicated given the plight of the Muslims in India. More in this report.
The 23rd March 1940 resolution called for a separate homeland for Muslims to guard them from persecution at the hands of the dominant Hindu majority. 8 decades later, India is now home to around 138 million Muslims. History bears witness to how a majority of Indian Muslims have lived under economic marginalization, religious persecution, and at times even genocide. But ever since the BJP government, headed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, took over in 2014, the situation has taken a turn for the worst.
He said, I have tried my best, but I have now come to this conclusion that after the British are gone, the Hindus are going to treat Muslims very, very badly, very shabbily. And he said, therefore I have come to this conclusion, a separate state of our own decision.
The Discriminatory Citizenship Amendment Act, demographical changes in Indian-occupied Kashmir and anti-Muslim mobs have jeopardized the lives of millions of Indian Muslims.
There is a lot of measurable evidence that suggests that attacks against minorities in India have increased over the past few years. There have been numerous reports by organizations like the Human Rights Watch, the United Nations, which have raised concerns about increasing marginalization of minorities in India.
Sane voices inside India, Indian scholarship, and even parliamentarians have confessed that Jinnah's ideology and the 23rd March resolution have been proven true. Meanwhile, Muslims in India continue to face untold miseries and disgrace at the hands of the BJP government. Manahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
And now moving on, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani is likely to propose a new presidential election within 6 months. Reuters quoted 2 Afghan officials as saying that Ghani will unveil his proposal at an international gathering in Istanbul next month. They said the proposal signals Ghani's refusal to a US plan calling for an inclusive interim setup to pave the way for peace in Afghanistan. More in this report.
With just weeks left before a deadline it agreed with the Taliban last year to end the longest war in U.S. history, Washington is seeking to push the Afghan government and the Taliban to share power. Talks between the two sides are currently stalled in Doha. Speaking on his first visit to NATO headquarters in Brussels, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said a review of options on withdrawal of troops is underway. He said the U.S. went in Afghanistan along with its NATO allies and will leave together when the time is right. He also pledged to rebuild and revitalize the transatlantic military alliance. NATO foreign ministers will discuss Afghanistan over the next 2 days in Brussels.
Russia and China have called for a UN Security Council summit after the West imposed curbs on them over alleged human rights violations. The two allies made the call in a joint statement following talks between their foreign ministers in China. They urged countries not to interfere in their affairs, with Moscow saying they believe the US is acting in a destructive way. According to Russian Foreign Ministry, the joint statement said a summit over heightened global political turbulence is the need of the hour. Earlier, China summoned the EU envoy and said the bloc should rectify its mistake to prevent a further damage to bilateral ties. In Myanmar, a 7-year-old girl has died of bullet wounds in Mandalay as security forces continue their crackdown on anti-coup protesters. At least one person was killed in shooting elsewhere in the city. The latest violence comes a day after the EU and the US imposed sanctions on military officials over human rights abuses. But the military has accused anti-coup protesters of arson and violence. The country plunged into chaos after the military seized power on the 1st of February and arrested elected leaders. Over 250 people have been killed since then. Israelis are voting in the fourth general election in 2 years after the ruling coalition collapsed in December. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a tough vote, being embroiled in several corruption trials. Election officials say vote counting will likely take several days due to coronavirus precautions and the upcoming Passover holiday. They warned the delay could be fertile ground for growing efforts to delegitimize the results. Meanwhile, the personal information of all voters was leaked by anonymous hackers a day before the elections. Israeli media said hackers published databases with 6.5 million names, addresses, and ID numbers. Palestine's Fatah movement says Israel is pressurizing President Mahmoud Abbas to cancel this year's elections. A Fatah Central Committee member Hussein al-Sheikh said Israel's Internal Security Services chief called for cancelling the polls. But al-Sheikh said Palestinians will move forward with the polls at any cost. Earlier, Israeli media said Tel Aviv conveyed a strong warning to Abbas over Hamas-Fatah unity in upcoming polls. Palestinians are set to elect a new legislature on May the 22nd and a president on July the 31st after a gap of 15 years. The Ethiopian Prime Minister has admitted to war crimes in Tigray, where fighting persists as the government troops hunt down fugitive rebels. Speaking in Addis Ababa, he confirmed for the first time that troops from neighboring Eritrea entered the region during the conflict. The Prime Minister said soldiers who committed atrocities will be held responsible, but he accused the rebels of drumming a war narrative. International rights organizations have called for an end to violence in the region and demanded an investigation into alleged war crimes. The conflict in Tigray began in November last year when Abiy sent troops into the region following an attack on military facilities. Hundreds of people have been killed and several displaced due to the conflict. In Niger, the death toll from coordinated raids on southwestern villages has risen to 137. Officials say the gunmen attacked 3 villages located near the border with Mali, shooting at everything that moved. A previous estimate by local authorities was of around 60. The government said by systematically targeting civilians, these armed bandits are reaching a new level of horror and savagery. In a statement, the government announced 3 days of national mourning, but it did not say who authorities believed was behind the attacks. Earlier, UN's refugee agency said the attacks can be a revenge from a recent arrest of people suspected of having links with the armed groups. In the U.S., 10 people, including a police officer, have been killed in a shooting at a supermarket in Boulder City of western Colorado state. Police say they have arrested the suspected gunman who got injured in the encounter. They said the motive behind the shooting is not known immediately. Police identified the slain officer as 51-year-old Eric Talley, saying he was the first to respond to the shooting. Talking to the media, Boulder Police Commander Kerry Yamaguchi said there is no ongoing public threat.
I can share with the public today, or this evening, that there is no ongoing public threat, that we do have a person of interest in custody. That person was injured during the incident and is being treated for the injuries.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Brazil, over 1,300 more people have died from coronavirus overnight, raising the death toll to over 295,000. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.7 million lives and infected more than 123 million people. WHO expert Van Kerkhove says the weekly global count of deaths from COVID-19 is rising again after about 6 weeks of declines. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has warned the US could see another avoidable surge if mitigation measures are not followed. Germany has also extended current lockdown to April 18, entering stricter curbs over the Easter holiday period. Turkey recorded its highest daily coronavirus cases since mid-December. In Asia, South Korea's President Moon Jae-in received a shot of AstraZeneca's vaccine as the country began to accelerate its inoculation drive. In Pakistan, 72 more people have lost their lives to the coronavirus and more than 3,200 tested positive overnight. The health ministry says the countrywide death toll is now approaching 14,000. So far, over 633,000 people have been infected in the country, of which more than 585,000 people have recovered. The ministry has detected over 34,500 active cases in the country. Meanwhile, nearly 2,500 people are in critical condition across the country. An Indian paramilitary trooper has hanged himself to death at the military headquarters in the Srinagar district of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The incident marks the 7th suicide by Indian Armed Forces personnel this year. Earlier this month, 3 soldiers, including a lieutenant colonel, committed suicide. Indian authorities say the reasons for the suicides are unknown. Last year, 42 Indian soldiers committed suicide in occupied Kashmir. In Bangladesh, the death toll from a massive fire that ripped through a Rohingya refugee camp has risen to 15. The UN Refugee Agency says over 560 people have been injured, while 400 are unaccounted for. It said more than 45,000 people have been displaced. Rescue officials said over 17,000 shelters had been destroyed in the blaze and tens of thousands had been displaced. They added that an investigation was underway to ascertain the cause of the fire. The vast majority of the people in the camps fled Myanmar in 2017 amid a military-led crackdown on the Rohingya that UN says was executed with a genocidal intent. In Sri Lanka, local leaders have urged the UN Human Rights Council to address the discriminatory policies faced by minorities. This comes as the UN's top rights body prepares to vote on a draft resolution over deteriorating rights situation in the country. Sri Lanka has faced criticism from human rights groups for discrimination against minority Muslims. Of the 47 states set to take part in the vote in Geneva, several have Muslim-majority population, including Pakistan and Bangladesh. Sri Lankan government's last year decision to mandate the cremation of all victims of COVID-19 sparked a backlash, but later the decision was reversed and burial was allowed. Meanwhile, UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet received a mandate to collect evidence of crimes during Sri Lanka's long civil war with Tamil Tigers. The international community has welcomed a new peace initiative from Saudi Arabia to end the war in Yemen. The Saudi initiative includes a nationwide ceasefire under the UN supervision and the reopening of the air and sea links.
Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud says, under the plan, political negotiations between the Yemeni government and the Houthis will be restarted. In a news conference, he said Riyadh will work with the international community to press the rebels to come to the negotiating table. Prince Faisal said the Saudi-led coalition will continue to face Houthi assaults with the necessary response. Yemen's internationally recognized government issued a statement welcoming the offer. British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said a nationwide ceasefire and action to ease humanitarian access restriction are essential. Welcoming Saudi offer, the U.S. State Department said all parties to the Yemen conflict should commit seriously to an immediate ceasefire. The United Nations and Pakistan also lauded Saudi Arabia's effort to end Yemeni war. But Houthi said there is nothing new in the offer. However, the group's chief negotiator said the Houthis will continue to talk with Riyadh, Muscat and Washington to try to reach a peace deal.
Lebanon's President and Prime Minister-designate Saad al-Hariri have failed to reach an agreement on a new cabinet. Following the meeting, Hariri said Michel Aoun wanted to dictate cabinet membership. In a televised address, Hariri said the president insisted on granting veto powers on policy to his political allies. He said the president sent a list of cabinet of either 18, 20 or 22 ministers with names to be filled in. Hariri called Aoun's demands unacceptable, saying it is not the job of the president to form a government. Responding, Aoun said he is surprised by Prime Minister-designate's comments as his proposal had not included a blocking minority. Lebanon has been without a government since August, and the economic crisis is posing the biggest threat to its stability. Moscow says it is ready for tit-for-tat measures after Bulgaria expelled 2 Russian diplomats, accusing them of espionage. The Russian embassy in Sofia said Moscow will reserve its right to retaliate. In a statement, the embassy called the expulsion groundless and unjustified. It said this démarche of Sofia will not contribute to the further construction of a constructive Russian-Bulgarian dialogue. Earlier, Bulgaria's foreign ministry said it had given a Russian diplomat 72 hours to leave the country. The move followed a letter from prosecutors that said 2 had been involved in activities incompatible with their status. Sofia has now expelled 8 Russian diplomats, including a military attaché, over suspected spying since October 2019. In Australia, torrential rains have pummeled parts of the country, sweeping away homes, bridges and livestock. Authorities have issued fresh flood warnings and evacuation orders amid the worst flooding in decades. The Australian Weather Agency has warned that 10 million people are threatened by severe weather conditions. It has also cautioned that the situation is far from over yet, as 2 major weather systems have collided. More than 18,000 people have been evacuated from their homes and 22,000 more ordered to do so. Emergency services and troops have been deployed to rescue the affected. A dedicated Lego collector in Vietnam has crafted entire walls out of small, multicolored bricks. More in this report.
Huang Dang steps into his Lego project room, filled to the brim with drawers full of tiny bricks, and slowly but surely starts to construct a Vietnamese fishing boat. Huang says he is most inspired by scenes close to home, his childhood home, a temple in Hanoi's old quarter, or a 1990s Vietnamese living room during Lunar New Year.
I categorize the bricks according to their functionality. For example, there are bricks used especially to build walls. Some are for details, so they are sorted by what they can build. It is tough to tell how many bricks are in those boxes, but my best guess is that this is half of the 2 million something bricks that I own. The other million are still mixed up in boxes.
Huang said he hopes to eventually build 10 large-scale creations for an exhibition and is currently about halfway to his goal. He said it takes about 5 months to finish a 5,000-piece facade, although he admits most of that time is spent sourcing the perfect brick.
I have to admit that 95% of the time spent is to find bricks. I do have them here, I just don't know where. They are mixed up in boxes that take up a lot of time to find. I often spend a whole evening looking for just that one brick.
Despite his massive collection, Hoang said he is always on the hunt for new pieces, and that is how he made what he calls his Lego friends, including Hang Huing in Ho Chi Minh City. The pair met over a Facebook group for builders and collectors.
Paintings by Edouard Monod, silverware by Pablo Picasso and a Banksy canvas are among the works on offer at an upcoming Sotheby's auction.
The London auction house will hold its first major sale of the year, titled Modern Renaissance, on 25th of March. The auction will span 500 years of art. Munch's Embrace on the Beach leads the lots with a price estimate of $12.5 to $16.6 million. A self-portrait of the Norwegian painter is priced at $6.2 to $8.9 million. Picasso's portrait of photographer Dora Maar is expected to fetch $8.9 to $11.7 million, while a set of silver plates by the Spanish artist has a price tag of $1.6 to $1.4 million. David Hockney's 4-meter wide landscape, Tall Dutch Trees After Hobbema, is seen fetching between $8.9 and $11.7 million. Other artworks on offer include Portrait of a Youth by 15th century painter Piero del Pollaiuolo with an estimate of $5.5 to $8.3 million. Elusive street artist Banksy's parody canvas of a 1991 Vanity Fair cover of actress Demi Moore is on sale at $2.7 to $4.1 million.
Filmmaker Elizabeth Lowe has chosen 3 abandoned dogs to be the subject of a new documentary called Stray. The documentary will depict the daily life in Istanbul through the eyes of 3 dogs that roam its streets searching for food. This report has the details.
Dogs are considered as the loyal and best friends of humans. Therefore, it is understandable that Lou has decided to take his friendship to the next level. The movie star's Zeytin likes to walk through the streets of Istanbul at night. Nazar easily befriends strangers, while Carter lives a construction site in the bustling Turkish city. Lou says she found Zeytin in a tunnel where she saw her running after a group of young Syrian refugees.
It started out from a very personal place. I had a childhood dog growing up who passed away, who I loved a lot. And I remember at the time feeling like I needed to suppress my grief at his passing because he wasn't a human family member. And that really led me to question sort of the role that this species hierarchy that we exist in has, and what value means and what sentience means when I could perceive the depth of his being.
Hong Kong-born director traveled to Turkey, fascinated by a 2004 law that protects stray animals from cruelty and dictates they receive good treatment. Lou says the documentary is inspired by her grief for her childhood dog.
And I remember when I landed in Turkey and went to Istanbul and saw the way the dogs were living, where it felt like they were communally cared for and they could have these transitory friendships with all the people who were around them. I was really amazed by that because it was a concept, a way of relating to dogs and other species that was completely foreign to me. And I wanted to document that and capture that for the rest of the world to see, to sort of ask us to reconsider our relationships with other species, and in particular dogs.
Stray will be released digitally on the 26th of March, with special previews held in the United Kingdom to mark the National Puppy Day.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. And now the business updates. The U.S. stocks have opened lower as energy and travel shares slipped as investors await remarks from the central bank over economic recovery. All the major bourses landed in negative territories, with Dow Jones Industrial Average Index and Nasdaq fell marginally. But the S&P 500 opened 0.1% lower. Meanwhile, the oil prices slid more than 4% over new COVID-19 pandemic curbs and slow vaccine rollouts in Europe. Ireland says the EU is willing to offer the UK flexibility in the trade rules governing Northern Ireland. Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said this depends on London producing a roadmap of its plans for the British region. In an interview, Coveney admitted there had been some back and forth between the two sides in recent weeks, but the Irish Foreign Minister said if the UK complies, the EU could look at flexibilities, including extensions to grace periods. Ireland has repeatedly voiced concerns regarding the adverse impact of the post-Brexit trade rules on its economy. Earlier this month, Northern Irish loyalist parliamentaries suspended support for the landmark Belfast peace agreement with Britain. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.